Let's go! Look at this. Got a marching band, and you got the Arkansas baseball team. Yeah, I'm in Fayetteville for a wedding. But, of course, we got some great LSU content going ahead. Subscribe to the channel. Let's go. It's a road to 2K. Let's go. By the way, Bomb Stadium, you know, it's pretty cool. It's up there with Alec Box. Let's go. Are you kidding me? TJ Finley's getting the start. I'm so excited that a Louisiana native is getting to live his dream. LSU right now, a 6-point favorite. The over-under set at 55. I'm going to give you my prediction at the end of the video. So TJ Finley gets the start. Obviously, that is the biggest storyline, but is it really the biggest storyline? I actually believe whether it was TJ Finley or Max Johnson, going into this, I thought Max Johnson had a slight lead, but Ed Orgeron brought up that TJ Finley was better on third down in practice. We know going into this, a true freshman quarterback is going to have a few bumps in the road. The main thing I'm looking for, can LSU's defense take that next step? Because they have been the worst defense we have ever seen at LSU through these first 3 games. So, Bo Pelini, you've got to fix these issues because South Carolina's quarterback, Colin Hill, is better than any quarterback you have faced thus far. He's been that consistent. He's a transfer from Colorado State, and he's kind of lit up every defense he has faced up to this point. One thing that's interesting, South Carolina's receivers have actually dropped a lot of footballs, but they do have a good tight end in Knox. They do have a strong running game, so they can do a little bit of everything, including the play-action game, which has kind of hurt LSU. Just any misdirection, any form of creative play calling has really hurt LSU. And then on top of that, that creative play calling gets even tougher to stop when you can't stop basic running plays. So I know the focus is going to be TJ Finley, the Ponchatoula kid, a 3-star recruit getting the start. But the number one story, can this LSU defense, after a much-needed bye week, step it up at this juncture? Obviously, the second biggest story is this LSU offense. And what I'm looking forward to is how much will LSU run the football? What personnel will LSU even run out there? And will LSU actually run the football with John Emery Jr.? If I'm LSU and I've looked at the first 3 games of film, I would hopefully see it from my perspective that John Emery Jr. has been the best running back. Give him the start. Let he and TJ Finley play the entire first half. And if it doesn't work itself out, mix it up. To me, one of the other big stories here is special teams. LSU special teams, despite being 1-2, has actually been pretty good. Cade York has been excellent. 2 field goals over 50 yards is impressive. Zach Van Rosenberg has been one of the best punters in the country with, I believe, 5 punts inside the 20-yard line, and Avery Atkins continues to boot the football through the end zone. So can LSU's consistent special teams continue to be great? Here's a few players to look out for in particular. Obviously, you know, the big story for me is TJ Finley. He's the big stud. But a player to look out for is Austin Dekulus. You know, he's been LSU's best offensive lineman up to this point. You know, Ed Ingram's supposed to be healthy. Maybe LSU runs the football a little bit more behind them. So I guess not only Dekulus, but Ed Ingram and that entire offensive line, they're going to have to take it to even higher heights. And let's be honest, South Carolina's defensive line, they've been okay, but they haven't been so good to where LSU's front shouldn't have problems blocking them. I'm actually going to go to the South Carolina side of the football. Is Isaac Mukamu, and I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but he went to Parkview High School with Terrace Marshall in Shreveport. He was a 3-star Louisiana recruit. LSU didn't necessarily pursue him. He was second team All-SEC. So Obviously, with LSU secondary and their struggles, Mukamu looks like a pretty big-time player. And overall, this South Carolina defensive back group has been excellent. Now, I know a lot of you LSU Tigers are going to be looking for number 3, Jordan Burch, who was deciding between LSU and South Carolina all the way up to the very last second. He decided to go with South Carolina. You know, he lived 10 minutes from campus. So many of you are going to be focusing on him because he is a true freshman. There's a lot of good 3-star defensive backs that LSU never pursues that end up being really good players elsewhere from the state of Louisiana. So be on the lookout for him, number 24 for South Carolina. And then my final player to look out for, Jabril Cox. And go ahead and throw Damon Clark out there because LSU linebackers have not been good this year. I mean, now I know Jabril Cox had the pick 6, but overall, they've not been good stopping basic running plays. I know they don't have Tyler Shelvin in front of him. Ika wasn't really available for the Missouri game. So I get all of that, but ultimately, you've got to be able to stop the run. And Ed Orgeron brought up that true freshman linebacker, Josh White, might get some snaps. Maybe Devonta Lee, the converted wide receiver who now plays linebacker, gets some snaps. Micah Baskerville. Overall, the LSU linebackers, and in particular the entire defense, has got to get better. And when I'm talking about better, I'm talking about just stopping the simple stuff. Against Missouri, they gave up way too many wide open touchdowns. So from Ed Orgeron to Bo Pelini to Bill Bush to Corey Raymond, all the way down to the players themselves, get it together. You had a bye week to figure this out. And on top of that, LSU, when they figured out that the Florida game was probably going to get postponed, they actually started getting ready for South Carolina last Wednesday. And if you win this game, guess who you get next week? A team that South Carolina just beat in Auburn, who has performed under expectations a lot like LSU. So now let's take a look at the spread. LSU kind of sort of surprising, a 6-point favorite here, with South Carolina so far being the far better team than LSU up to this point. And let's be honest, South Carolina has been one of the big stories in the SEC, along with Arkansas. They have really outkicked their coverage this year, beating Auburn, really challenging Florida, tearing up Vanderbilt a lot like LSU did. And, you know, overall, this offense has looked very explosive. Even in the first game against Tennessee, where South Carolina lost at home, they were moving the football. So Colin Hill is a consistent, smart quarterback. He doesn't do anything spectacular, but he's one of those guys that's going to make the simple throws. And guess what? LSU has not had the simple throws covered this year. Even with LSU starting a new quarterback, and even with LSU making this decision, these quarterbacks have been running with the ones for a week and a half now. And LSU's going to get this game at home. This is their first true night game at home in Tiger Stadium. So the crowd that's going to be there, they're going to be fired up. They're going to be supporting the Tigers. And let's be honest, this team has gone through so much adversity, whether it be the recruiting violations, whether it be Myles Brennan getting hurt, whether it be all the other off-the-field stuff that may or may not be going on with this team right now. You know, championship teams, or teams that have some championship caliber players from last year's team, they band together. They find their best way to figure this out. With that said, with a true freshman quarterback starting, and with the way South Carolina has looked, even in losses, they have looked good. I'm very concerned with LSU winning this game. So, you know, for me to say LSU's going to cover a 6-point spread, I'm not going to say that they do that until I actually see them do that against a decent team. So I would lean towards South Carolina. Now that over-under is very interesting. Interesting at 55. I would lean, I don't know. I would lean towards the under. So because of all of those unknowns, even with a week to prepare, knowing that LSU is making major changes to the defense, 55 is not the biggest number, in particular with LSU's defense being so bad. I would lean towards the under. I do believe LSU finds a way to get this done. Final score, LSU 28, South Carolina 24. Subscriber shout out, let's go to Dan. You guys are done. Done. Really? This is not the Auburn situation. So many people are comparing Ed Orgeron and LSU to Gene Chizik and Auburn. Both teams had transcendent quarterbacks. Both teams had ridiculous undefeated runs to the national championship game. The difference, though, is that Auburn, after the Cam Newton run, didn't recruit to the same level as LSU is recruiting right now. It looks as if they're going to have a top 5 class next year. It looks as if they're going to have a top 5 class the year after that. Now, obviously, if this season turns into a Florida State situation and then the next year LSU is horrible, Dan, man, you have a point, but I just don't see that happening, especially with Eric Gilbert and B.J. Ojolari and Elias Ricks being such great players. And heck, if TJ Finley looks fantastic, the future looks pretty bright for LSU, even with the scholarship reduction. And I know our last video was a little bit more of a serious tone, but let's be honest, it was a serious story involving Odell Beckham Jr. and Vidal Alexander. So, let's be honest, things look pretty negative right now. But to write off LSU at this point, it's just crazy. And finally, this man puts me on like nobody else. Tremaine318 is a huge TJ Finley fan. He says that he already knows the playbook like the back of his hand. And let's be honest, TJ Finley has a huge arm. He obviously was impressive enough for LSU to include him in his national championship game prep. To be around Joe Burrow, even for just those few practices, and to be around the team for this long. And not only that, Ed Orgeron really believed in this kid. You go back and look at all the recruiting visits that Orgeron and Ensminger made to Finley, and I know it's not as far of a distance to go to Ponchatoula, but, that really showed me that LSU really believes in him. And I know that he's only a 3-star prospect, but a lot of that was due to his weight. He's lost that weight. He's down 20, 25 pounds. He's trimmer. And if his football IQ and his ability to run the offense, and Ed Orgeron brought up his ability to throw back shoulder throws, is as good as we believe it's going to be, this kid might look pretty special. It's power, Hour LSU. Bow. There's a chicken wing shack right here, and I know it's like 2 in the morning. I'm gonna go get some.